Hi, I'm Brittany, a neurodivergent mum and speech pathologist. This is Not Just Theories, where I share what actually works in my real, messy life. Because life doesn't follow a theory. Here's what I actually do. Hello, and welcome back to Not Just Theories. Today, I am going to be talking about a toolkit that I use to engage with little kids. Mostly mine, but I use these at work as well, especially when things are feeling quite tricky. So a lot of what I'm sharing today, the toolkit, is inspired by a book that I absolutely love. And I recommend it to everyone I know with kids under the age of about 7. And the book is called How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. So this isn't going to be a summary of the book. Please go and read the book if this is something that you find interesting. But I will be talking about what's actually stuck for me and what we use in our real life and how the ideas can look different depending on your child's age and stage. I will be talking about it in the context of my children who are 1.5 and 4 and the way these strategies have shifted over time as my eldest sort of has moved through those different ages. So I will then next week start talking about a very specific parenting challenge, which was toothbrushing. So this week I'll be going through how we talk to our kids in a way that actually sometimes gets them to listen. So one of the biggest shifts from this book was that idea that you can just let go of, which is that there's a right way to get kids to cooperate. Instead, the book talks a lot about having options. Because what works at age 2 might not work at age 4, or even what worked today might not work tomorrow or this afternoon. And that doesn't mean you're doing everything wrong. It just means that your child is developing and their needs are changing and their nervous system isn't always in the same place. So instead of finding one strategy, it's important to have a toolkit. And before I go into the strategies, I want to talk quickly about why they work, because most of these approaches reduce the feeling of being controlled. They increase connection between the parent and the child. They tap into play and imagination, which is how we know children learn and engage with the world, and they support your child's regulation. They basically help your kids feel safe and connected and a little bit more in control, and that helps them be more able to cooperate. Not always, but more often. We know control in particular can be a really tough one for toddlers because there is actually not a whole lot that your children can control about their life. Often parents are in charge of what happens almost every day, almost every minute of every day, and children understand that and they are not always very happy about it. So as much as possible, giving your child control where you can is a really helpful strategy to help them get on board with some of the things that you actually do need them to do. So I'm going to talk a bit now about some of the tools that we have in our toolkit. And the first one is playfulness. And this is definitely the biggest shift for us. If you learn one strategy from the toolkit, it would be playfulness. So instead of it being this like extra thing that only fun parents do, it's actually often the strategy that can lead to the least amount of effort to have your child participate in an activity that you wanted them to do. So this sometimes looks like things like instead of saying put your shoes on, you could try something like saying, oh no, these shoes are looking for their feet. They can't find them. Or quick, your foot has to hide before the shoe catches it. Or even just like, oh, I wonder if your socks can sneak onto your toes. If your child was having trouble with getting dressed and you really needed them to get dressed, taking the time to make it into something playful like, oh no, where did your arm go? I can't find it. Or this shirt only works if you roar like a dinosaur. You can use it for things like nappy changes, like, oh no, is this the button on your tummy to make you freeze? Beep, and try and get your child to freeze. So the idea of becoming playful is that it shifts the interaction from being a power struggle to being a game. And it engages your child's curiosity rather than their resistance. And it invites them to participate rather than demanding them to participate. And level of playfulness can look quite different at different ages, because when your child is younger, if they're close to that sort of 1 to 2-ish-year-old mark, you do want to try and keep it quite simple, probably a little bit more physical and repetitive. So you're using big gestures and silly sounds and really predictable games. You'll try and use the same game every time for a few days. Whereas when your child gets a little bit older, closer to that 4 or 5, you might start using more imagination and more humor and introducing more characters and stories. So at age 2, trying to get dressed, it might just be the sock is making a silly noise and is going burp, 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 burp as it gets closer and closer to the foot. Whereas at 4, the sock might have a whole story about who it is and why it needs to go onto the foot. So playfulness is a strategy that can really, it requires a lot of creativity and energy, but the payoff is usually worth it. We find in our house that when we just don't have the energy to be playful, we actually end up expending more energy on a battle. It's really hard to do this when you're tired, but in our experience, it has just every single time putting that extra time and effort into being playful right off the bat is so much less energy than engaging in a battle with something that is going to be tricky for our child. Another tool in the toolkit from the book is to join your child's world first before placing any demands on them. So instead of approaching your child and pulling them straight into your agenda, first step into their world. So if they're really busy playing when you need to leave the house and they're playing with their cards, instead of just saying, hey, it's time to get in the car, try and join their world, sit down, look at what they're doing. Wow, your cars are so busy today. I wonder if they could drive all the way to our big car. Or if they're in a bath resistant phase and they're playing, I wonder if your toys are dirty. Maybe they need to have a little wash in the bath. Obviously, only do that if they're playing with a toy that you're comfortable putting in the bath. Or if they're avoiding the pram and busy playing, can you join and go, oh, your teddy looks like he might want to go for a ride. Should we help him get in the pram first? So by sitting down, joining their world, looking at what they're doing, and then extending that narrative into what you want your child to do, it lowers the resistance. So you're actually working with your child instead of against them. So again, this looks quite different at different ages. At age 2, it might be quite simple observations and imitation, a little bit less sort of imagination. It might just be more like, oh, you've got a little car. I wonder if it can go to the big car, versus sort of the age 3, 4, 5-ish, where you're building on their ideas and adding a narrative about like, oh, your teddy looks like they want to go for a ride. I wonder where they want to go in that pram. Should we help them get into that pram and we can see where we can go on our adventure? So that's sort of joining their world first rather than just pulling them out of it to do what you want to do. Another thing that you can use is a strategy called giving information instead of commands. So this is something like, instead of telling your child, put your hat on, you might say, oh, it's really sunny. We need to protect our skin from the sun. How can we do that? So you're giving them that information about it being sunny outside and their skin needing protection, and then they can come up with that idea of putting their hat on. Or instead of telling them don't run away, you might say the car park is not a safe place to run. Or you might, one of the ways that we use this a lot in our house is, oh, those toys belong in that basket. So just giving information about where the toys belong. We're not asking our child to pick up or clean up, but often if we give that little bit of information, or they take their shoes off, oh, shoes belong in the shoe rack. We're not asking them to do anything. We're not putting any kind of demand. We're just giving them information. And this idea of giving the information instead of the commands works for some children because it reduces that sort of you versus me dynamic, and you're not actually telling your child what to do. You're giving them information that they can then act on independently. So rather than feeling like they're having demands placed on them, they're in control of what they do with that information. Oh, towels don't belong on the floor. And just wait and see what your child does. So at age 2, this is often very short and concrete. So we do this a lot with my youngest at the moment. We say, oh, shoes off. Oh, shoes belong on the rack. Or even something like, oh, I see shoes on the floor. And then just sort of wait and draw your child's attention to the shoes. And I mean, my little one is still at the age where he's quite happy to put things away. So we don't need to give him any more information. Just drawing his attention to something that's out of place is enough to have him usually try and put it where it belongs. But age 4, they can handle a little bit more explanation. So this is really quite helpful with self-care tasks like putting sunscreen on, giving them information about why sunscreen is helpful and what sunscreen does, rather than just telling them they have to wear it. And particularly for my eldest, having that information available to her really helps her comply with health tasks like wearing sunscreen, even if she doesn't want to. So this is sort of something that we've found more helpful as our child's gotten older, but we do still use it with my youngest. The next strategy in the toolkit is one that almost every parent knows about, which is to offer choices within boundaries. So it's that idea of giving your child control, but in a contained way. So it might be something like, do you want to wear your red shirt or your blue shirt? Or to get in the car seat, do you want to climb in yourself or have me help? Or into the bath, do you want to hop in or jump in like a rocket? Obviously with some support to make sure that they're doing that safely. And so the idea behind this is that it helps meet that need for autonomy without removing the boundary. The parent is giving what they consider appropriate choices and they're happy with either option, but the child then gets to choose what they want to do within that boundary. So at age 2, this is that keeping it really simple, giving them just 2 options. Age 4, you might still limit it, but you can be slightly more flexible with what kind of choices that you're giving them. So I think because this is quite a well-known strategy, a lot of parents have tried it and sometimes it works for their child and sometimes it doesn't. So I do want to acknowledge that this is probably not new to anyone. Usually for us, this is just part of the toolkit. It doesn't work as magically as a lot of people on the internet seem to think it should. So we use it when we can. It's interesting because our eldest is now old enough that she's figured out the strategy. Obviously, they figure it out pretty quickly. And she actually does the reverse to us as well. She'd be like, can I have 3 biscuits or 6 biscuits? When we haven't necessarily agreed that we're going to have biscuits at that meal time as it is. So, it is a strategy that your child will use back at you. And it is something that there are just some children, you can give them 2 choices and they will say no to both of them. Do you want a red shirt or blue shirt? No, I don't want to get dressed. So it's not a magic bullet. It's not the magic bullet people talk about it, but it is important to have in your toolkit. There are some times and some children that this strategy really works for. For us, we find it really helps with when we've chosen 2 options that are going to also be acceptable to our child. It doesn't work when neither option is going to be acceptable. So if I ask my eldest, do you want to wear a red shirt or a blue shirt? She is in a phase and has been for a long time where she will absolutely not wear shirts. She will only wear dresses. So that she would just say no. But if I ask her, do you want to wear your unicorn dress or your mermaid dress, then that is more likely to get a response from her that's appropriate if she's in a good mood. So thinking about the choices that you're offering, knowing that this is not a magic bullet, for us, having 2 really playful options helps us more than just having 2 boring options. So thinking about merging it together with that first strategy of playfulness. So instead of for the car seat, do you want to climb in or have me help? Giving them the options of, do you want to climb in like a monkey or have me drop you in like a rocket? Or something like that. So adding that extra little bit of playfulness makes it more likely that one of those options will jump out to your child as being something they actually do want. Another strategy is to acknowledge your child's feelings first. So before moving to action, pause and acknowledge how they might be feeling. So if you want them to leave the park, acknowledge that feeling. You really wish you could stay longer. It's hard to leave. For getting into the car, or you don't feel like getting in right now, or for sunscreen, you don't like how it feels on the skin. So feeling understood can reduce the intensity of resistance. Not always, but it can reduce that intensity. It does not mean that they will agree, but it can soften the moment a little bit. So at age 2, this often looks really short and simple, whereas at age 4 or 5, you can do that more detailed reflection. Another strategy that is from the book is to make everything into a game. And this is a little bit different to the playfulness. So this is more like turning things into like a small challenge. So the idea of like for the pram might be, can you climb in before I count to 5? Or for the bath, like, oh, let's see if the water can catch your toes. Or for getting dressed, like how fast can we do it? So it's turning it into more like a game or a competition or a challenge rather than playfulness, which is that more like imagination game type way. So this is like to add sort of energy and motivation and sort of shifting things from being a demand to being a challenge, which is a subtle shift. So it's good because it still keeps your child sort of understanding you're asking them to do something tricky, but you're challenging them with it. So we use that one a lot for my eldest because she does love to win. So we have races for so many things because it helps. And you can do this with timers. You can be like, hey, can you do this before the timer beeps? Can you, I'm going to time how fast you can run home from the park. And I'm going to tell you how long it took us to get home. So making it a game or a challenge can be a really helpful strategy for some kids, particularly if you're not having them race another child. So rather than sort of feeding into sibling competition and being like, hey, can you beat your brother into the car seat? I mean, the brother might be a baby when you first start doing that, and it works really nicely with a baby because the baby doesn't care. But obviously there's going to be a shift at a point in time where that sibling does care that they're getting beaten and they both care about winning, and that's when that strategy stops working. So shifting the focus then to being something like a beat the timer or beat the parents, so the siblings together. I wonder if you can both get into the car before daddy manages to get the pram in the boot. So challenging, thinking about who you're challenging, when you're challenging, and what dynamics that's feeding into can be part of that strategy. And then the final strategy I want to talk about is using imagination to bridge cooperation. And this sort of builds on that playfulness strategy that I spoke about first. But this is that idea of using your imagination to make things more fun. So if you're trying to put sunscreen on, this might be pretending that it's paint and you're doing face painting. Or it could be magic cream. And hey, we put this magic cream on you and it turns you invisible. Or you could, put the sunscreen on and you could be pretending to give your child like a special spa treatment. So for us, we use that imagination as well as some props. So, when we were having lots of sunscreen battles, we went and we bought a fancy foundation makeup brush from the chemist and we used the brush and we did face painting. Most days we're like, I'm going to paint your face. What do you want to be today? You want to be a unicorn. Okay, let's paint a unicorn on your face. And obviously I was just applying sunscreen, but turning it into that idea of face painting and imagination really helped. It was also sort of incorporating that choice into the same thing. Hey, what do you want to be? You can tell me what you want to be. You're controlling this thing, but I'm deciding that we are doing sunscreen. If you're trying to get your child into the car seat, can you do a countdown together and then blast off like a rocket and jump into the car seat? If you're wanting your child to get into the bath, could it be an ocean? They're a pirate in a ship in the bath. Or can it be a potion lab and you can give them different props to play with in the bath that are going to be helping them like pour and mix? So really sort of thinking outside the box, like what's going to make this fun for my child? Because you can bypass resistance if you engage your child's imagination, and instead of forcing them to do something, invite them into something that's going to be appealing to them. And even with all of this, your child will sometimes still say no. Sometimes your child will just be tired and overwhelmed and dysregulated. And sometimes you will be too. So in those moments, the goal is not about perfect strategy use. Sometimes you will just have to hold a boundary, stay as calm as you can, and just get through. Like that will absolutely still happen with all of those things like getting dressed and putting sunscreen on and having baths and getting in the car. Sometimes you do just need to give that choice, like, hey, you can get into the car. If you're not in the car by yourself in 10 seconds, I will carry you in. So giving that firm boundary, the consequence, making it quite clear you're giving your child a choice to do it independently first. But if you're in a hurry and you're running late for an appointment, you have to get there. That's a whole different story. You can be playful as long as you like. Sometimes it will not work. So just to bring it all together, what I've found over time is that these strategies often layer together. So I will use multiple tools from within the toolkit in a given situation. So I might start by acknowledging a feeling, and then I'll add a playful element with a choice and shift the moment that way. So sometimes you might try one thing and then another and being flexible like that is almost like the strategy. Be flexible. Have different tools in your toolkit for different situations, and try them. And sometimes having a second person that knows the same tools can be so helpful. I have been at my wit's end one time getting my child ready, and I've tried playfulness and I just wasn't creative enough to think of something that would work. And I tried all of the strategies and I was getting a bit frustrated. And then my husband came along and he just had a different creative, playful idea. And it worked. So, sometimes that can be really helpful too if you've only got one brain and one imagination. So sharing the specific strategies and ideas that you've used with people around you so that they can use it too. We were at our friend's house the other day and we were there for dinner. So we'd taken our kids' toothbrushes and we did toothbrushing afterwards, and they saw the way we did it and they were like, oh, hey, can you send us the link to that song that you just used? Because I think that might be really helpful for us with the toothbrushing. So I am going to talk more specifically about toothbrushing next week, because that's something we've used so many strategies over the years, because we keep having to come up with new ones to get toothbrushing to happen in our house. And that sort of interaction was what actually prompted me to do this episode, because I think it is so hard sometimes to think of new things to try. So having that framework of these are the ideas of the strategies, but then within those strategies, lots of ideas of ways that you can be playful and imaginative, because parents and adults aren't always good at imagination. So I'm going to share one real life example now about getting dressed, but next week the whole episode is just going to be me sharing like all the 50 billion different things that we've tried over the years to help make toothbrushing happen. So my real life example today will be about getting dressed, because sometimes these strategies sound great in theory. I mean, like I said, the one about giving 2 choices is one you read everywhere, but it's harder to picture what it actually looks like, particularly across different days and weeks. For us, getting our eldest child dressed was a really big challenge for a period of time. She'd sort of just turned 2, and there were days, multiple days, where we did not leave the house at all because my child refused to put a nappy on. And she wasn't toilet trained yet, so it wasn't something we could just work around. So it was really stuck. We were getting stuck inside the house, unable to leave the house. And for us, that period was not about finding one strategy that worked. We often had to use every tool in the toolkit every day. So the first thing we did was just introduce a really simple visual schedule. So instead of it was me saying we need to get dressed and then we'll leave, she had something concrete to see. So we had a picture there for a nappy and a shirt and pants and socks and shoes and sunscreen and hat. And we'd put them on there and she could physically take them off as we went through the list. So when she put her nappy on, she could pull the picture of the nappy off and post it in like a little finished box. And I think what was really interesting about this is that it shifted the control of who was in charge from being me telling her what to do to her being the one to say like, oh, we need to do this next. So she'd look at the nappy picture and then she'd go, oh, nappy. And then she'd go off and we could get the nappy together and put it on. And then we'd pull nappy off and I'd say, oh, what do you need to do next? And she could say shirt or socks, and tell me what to do. So giving back that sense of control, but also having that sense of predictability. We had to do this every day before we left the house. We also always offered choices. And I really mean like always. So things like the flower dress or the unicorn dress, or this nappy or this one, because we had different types of nappies available. We had pull-ups and the Velcro ones, so she could choose. And to be honest about this one, choices did not usually solve the problem on their own, but if we skipped them, it almost always made it worse. So the choices for us were less about this will fix the issue of her getting dressed, and more about by offering choices, we're not escalating things further. Playfulness was probably the most powerful tool for us and is ongoing for every communication issue we have, is ongoing the most powerful tool. And sometimes it can look really elaborate and take a lot of time. So take pretending to be a sock, for example. Some days I would be the sock. I would pick it up. I would put my hand in it like a little sock puppet and I would say, I'm so hungry. I need something to eat. Should I try this nose? And I'd, have a little nibble on her nose. No, that's not what I feel like. Oh, what about this hand? Oh, no, that's not right. I don't think socks are meant to eat hands. Maybe I should try eating a foot. Where can I find one? Usually, hopefully at this point, if you've done all of the other things, your child will lift up their foot and let you put the sock on, and then finally be like, nom, 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 that foot was delicious. And I would sort of latch onto her toes and put the sock onto her foot. And then I would wag her little foot around with the sock on it, and it would say like, hello, brother sock, you should try eating a foot too. I see another one over there. And then the second sock would do something really quite similar. And it sounds ridiculous and exhausting because it is. But that silliness broke through the resistance in a way that nothing else ever did. There are also moments where I really needed to hold a boundary really quite clearly. So instead of saying something like, put your clothes on, I would give information, and I would say something like, you're not allowed to go to the party without clothes on. So again, shifting it from me versus her to this is information about how the world works. You can do with that information what you will. You want to go to the party. You're not allowed to go to the party naked. And we would not leave the house without clothes on. We also, as I mentioned, my eldest is quite competitive. We often use racing and challenges, and they often work really well. So I bet I can get ready quicker than you can really motivate her. We use this one all the time if she's refusing to use the bathroom before we leave the house. It's just like, I bet you I can do my just in case wee before you do. And it motivates my child like nothing else. It's intense. This works for some children much more than others. I know there are some kids who are just not at all competitive, but if they are, the racing can be such a good option. And another thing to think about is what is the resistance telling you? Sometimes there would be a lot of resistance, and it was something like, oh, I can see you really don't want to wear those pants. I wonder if they're not comfortable for you. And sometimes that was it. So we could switch to a different pair, and that small adjustment made a big difference. So what is your child telling you when they're resisting something? Is it because they're feeling like they don't control anything? In which case, one of those strategies that gives them control back might be the thing that works. Are they trying to tell you that there's another reason that they're not doing what you want to do? Those pants aren't comfortable. They don't like the feeling or the smell of that sunscreen. So thinking about what kind of adjustment matches the barrier, like what's going to overcome that specific barrier for that specific child in that moment. So the important thing is, like, this isn't about picking one strategy and it always working. This was me every day. I was trying the visual schedule. I was offering choices. I was adding play. I was acknowledging feelings. I was pivoting if something specific didn't work, often all within the same morning. And eventually we did move through that phase, thank goodness. Not because we found the perfect strategy, but because we stayed flexible, we stayed responsive, we kept connecting with our child, we tried to minimize it turning into a battle, and also she just got older. So it started being less of an issue. We realized things like, okay, no, she doesn't like wearing those things. And we just stopped asking her to wear the things that she didn't want to wear, but we didn't stop on things like sunscreen and hats. So thinking about, is this a safety issue, or is this just I wanted her to wear that because it was a cute outfit? We just gave up on that. It was, you will wear clothes that you think are comfortable in a way that makes it comfortable for you. Pick your battles. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I've tried these things and my child still resists, that is so normal. This is not about your child perfectly cooperating at all times. It's about trying to reduce friction when you can. It's about trying to build connection when you can, and making some of those hard moments a little bit easier some of the time. So I want you to think about some of these strategies as you go through the next week, and try and think about how you can switch from asking yourself, how can I get my child to do this, to being, how can I engage them here? And that might look like play and connection or imagination, or just trying something a little bit different. So I know I've talked for a long time. This is quite a long episode. So I'm going to wrap up now. But next episode, I'm going to share what this toolkit looked like really specifically across the last 3 years of trying to get my children to brush their teeth, because we have tried so many different games and activities. So I'll be sharing really, really specific examples of the playfulness and the imagination in particular. And I hope that you'll come back and find that helpful. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much for listening to Not Just Theories. I really appreciate you being here. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the show is to follow, leave us a rating or review, or just share this episode with someone else who you think might find it comforting or useful. I hope to see you back here soon.